Tell me this right now. Where in the world are you watching from? And what time is it there? Because what you're about to hear happened in a place where mercy was rarer than rain. The rope had cut so deep into her wrists that the skin had turned black. Thomas Reed saw that first, before he saw her face, before he knew her name, before he understood what kind of evil walks on two legs in broad daylight. He'd been riding back from Santa Fe, following the canyon trail where miners sometimes passed. The cart looked abandoned, one axle broken, the canvas shredded by wind. He was about to ride on when he heard it, a sound so faint it barely rose above the desert wind. A whimper. He swung down and walked closer, hand on the grip of his revolver. The smell hit him first, sweat, blood, leather. Then he saw her, a woman maybe 28, tied at the wrists and ankles, blouse torn and caked with sand. For a second he thought she was dead. Then her eyes opened, bloodshot and terrified, and her voice came out like gravel scraping stone. "Please." It burned so bad. Thomas froze. The words were weak, but they hit him like a fist to the chest. He cut the rope with his hunting knife and caught her before she collapsed. Her body was scorching with fever. She tried to speak again, but only air came out. He lifted her into his arms, feeling how light she was, how wrong it was for anyone to weigh that little. At his saddlebag, he found his canteen. He touched the water to her cracked lips, slow, careful. She coughed, then swallowed. A tremor ran through her hands, half pain, half thirst. "How long have you been here?" he asked quietly. Her mouth moved, but no words came. He laid her in the shade beside the cart. Her wrists were blistered raw. The rope cuts deep, some bleeding fresh as the pressure eased. He cleaned them with water, tore his own shirt to wrap them tight. A small brass locket hung around her neck, glinting in the sun, sticky with dried blood. She held onto it like it was the last thing keeping her breathing. The wind picked up, pushing sand across the open basin. Thomas glanced around. No trail, no tracks, no mule team. Who would leave her out here to die? And why? He looked back at her face. Her eyes had closed again, but tears slid down through the dust on her cheeks. He knew he couldn't leave her. He lifted her once more and set her across his saddle. The horse snorted as if it too could smell what had been done. As he turned toward the long road north, the sun dipped behind the mesa, bleeding orange over the land. He looked down at her face and whispered, "You're safe now. Just hold on." But in that silence, even he could feel it. This wasn't just cruelty. It was a message. And as the horse carried them toward Red Rock Station, one question burned in his mind. Who would hate a woman enough to leave her for the vultures? Grace woke up to the smell of coffee and pine smoke. For a second, she thought she was in heaven. Then her body reminded her she wasn't. Pain rushed back like fire under her skin. She tried to sit up. Her arms screamed. The bandages were clean, tight, not her own doing. A low voice spoke from across the small room. "Easy now. You've been out a full day." Thomas sat near the stove, turning beans in a tin pot. His shirt was off one shoulder, a fresh bandage on his forearm from where the rope had burned him too. Grace blinked, unsure if he was real. "Where am I?" she whispered. "Red Rock Station." "My place." He handed her a cup of water. "Drink slow. You were near gone when I found you." For the next 2 days, Grace drifted in and out of sleep. Sometimes she woke just long enough to take a sip of broth Thomas made from beans and wild sage. He changed her bandages twice a day, spoke little, but never left her alone too long. The fever broke on the 3rd morning. When she finally opened her eyes for real, the world had color again. He poured a bowl of beans and set it on her lap. "Eat," he said. She did, and the first swallow hit her stomach like a spark of life. Tears welled before she could stop them. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. He nodded. Quiet. You want to tell me who did this to you? She stared into the bowl, her fingers shaking. It was my employer, she said softly. I worked for the Caldwells over by the canyon. Her eyes went distant, her voice smaller. He came to the storage shed last night, tried to put his hands on me. I hit him with a shovel. His wife saw us, thought I was trying to take him. Margaret always hated me. She thought I was after her husband long before that night. I guess when she saw us, it just gave her the reason she wanted. She paused, breath hitching. They tied me up, said I'd learn what shame feels like. Thomas didn't speak. The only sound was the beans bubbling slow. He kept his gaze on the stove, jaw tight. Then he said, "And they left you there just like that." She nodded, her lip quivered, but she pressed it flat, proud even in her pain. "I didn't cry until I saw you. Guess that's when it felt safe enough to hurt." He looked at her then. Really looked. She was young, too young to have eyes that tired. "You always feed strangers like this?" she asked. "Only the half-dead ones." That made her laugh just a little. It was the first good sound in that house in a long time. Outside, cicadas screamed in the heat. Inside, for a moment, it was almost peaceful. But peace never lasted long out here. While Grace ate, Thomas went to fetch water from the trough. He saw tracks in the dust, fresh hoofprints heading north, too heavy to be drifters, too neat to be lost. He felt it in his gut before his mind caught up. Somebody knew she was still alive. And they were coming back for her. That night, the wind came up hard across the basin. The lantern on the porch flickered like it was scared to. Thomas checked the horses, checked his rifle, then stepped inside. Grace sat by the stove, hair brushed back, a blanket around her shoulders. She looked better, but there was still that look in her eyes, like she was waiting for something bad to find her again. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. "Every time I close my eyes, I hear him. That man. His boots on the wood floor. His voice." Thomas poured coffee into 2 tin cups. "Then don't close your eyes yet," he said. "Sit and drink." They sat in silence for a long while. The only sound was the whistle of wind through the boards. Just before dawn, the dog started barking. Thomas stood, slow but ready. Grace's hands went wide around her cup. He went to the window and saw dust rising down the trail. A single rider first, then 2 more. He knew that shape on the front horse. Richard Caldwell. Thomas stepped onto the porch, rifle low but ready. Richard pulled up short, his grin sharp as a knife. He had sent his ranch hands back first. A man like Richard liked to do his own threatening. Thought it made him look brave. "You got something of mine, Reed," he called out. Thomas didn't move. "Don't see your name on her." Richard spat in the dirt. "She's a liar and a thief. She belongs to the law." Grace came to the doorway behind him, voice trembling. "You left me to die." That did it. Richard's face twisted. He swung down from his horse and started for her, yelling words no decent man should ever say. Thomas stepped in his path, and the next second, Richard hit the ground hard. The 2 men rolled in the dust, fists flying, boots scraping gravel. Thomas fought like someone who'd buried too many good things already. When he finally pinned Richard, blood streaked across both their faces. "Go home," Thomas said, breathing heavy. "Next time you come here, bring the truth." Richard staggered to his feet, spitting red. "This ain't over," he hissed. Then he swung up on his horse and rode off, dust swallowing him whole. Grace stood frozen by the door. Thomas turned, his chest rising and falling. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded, eyes glassy. "I thought he'd kill me again. I guess I was wrong." He gave a small smile. "Guess you were." The sun broke over the ridge, light pouring across the valley. But even in that light, Thomas felt something darker coming. A man like Richard never quit while his pride still breathed. He poured Grace another cup of coffee, hands still shaking. "Eat something," he said. "You'll need your strength. Next time he won't come alone." And he was right. By the time the next sunset fell over Red Rock Station, the law was riding in with him. So before we face that storm together, go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you want to see what happens when justice meets the high desert. Now pour yourself a cup of coffee, lean back, and tell me this. What time is it where you are? And where in the world are you listening from? By the next evening, the sky over Red Rock Station looked bruised. Dark, clouds pressed low, the kind that make a man feel something bad is on its way. Thomas sat on the porch sharpening his knife while Grace fed the chickens by the pen. Both of them were quiet. They didn't need words to feel what was coming. For 2 days after the fight, the ranch stayed quiet. But Thomas noticed riders on the far ridge more than once. Richard was spinning his tale in town, saying Grace had stolen from him and tried to run. By the time word reached the marshal, the story had already grown teeth. Then they heard the sound. Hooves. Not one horse this time, several. Thomas stood, wiping his hands on his jeans. A dust trail wound down the ridge like a snake. At the front rode Richard Caldwell, and beside him, wearing the star of Apache County, was Marshal Hector Reyes. Grace froze where she stood. Thomas told her to stay inside. He stepped down off the porch as the riders pulled up. The marshal was a broad man, salt and pepper beard, eyes that looked like they'd seen too much and still didn't care to see more. "Thomas Reed," he said, "I hear you're keeping a woman that don't belong to you." Thomas kept his voice calm. "She belongs to herself, Marshal. You want to ask her? She's right inside." Richard snorted. "She's a liar. She stole from my wife, ran off with cash from the ranch, and this man helped her hide." Marshal Reyes turned his gaze to Grace, who had stepped into the doorway. She looked small but steady, her hands still bruised but no longer shaking. "I stole nothing," she said. "I was tied up and left to die. Ask him where the rope burns came from." Richard laughed, ugly and forced. "She's crazy. You can see that." The marshal studied them both, silent, a long time. Then he motioned for his deputy to check the cart parked behind the barn. Inside they found a torn shawl with the Caldwell brand stitched in silver thread. The old cart still sat half buried near the dry creek. No one had touched it since the storm rolled through. Dust had covered most of it, but some things never wash away easy. And beside it, a small square of fabric with blood and rope fibers still caught in the weave. Grace's eyes filled when she saw it. "That's mine," she whispered. "He used it to gag me." Thomas didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The marshal's eyes softened just a bit. He turned to Richard. "You got a strange way of taking care of your help, Caldwell." Richard's face went red. "She's lying. You can't prove nothing." The marshal's hand rested on his pistol, not to draw it, just to remind everyone he could. "Maybe not today, but I'll be watching you, Caldwell. Every step." Richard spat, mounted his horse, and yanked the reins hard. He didn't look back, but the look in his eyes promised trouble wasn't done yet. The marshal tipped his hat to Grace. "You stay put for now. We'll let the courts decide the rest." Then he turned to Thomas. "Keep her safe, Reed. Some men don't learn unless the Lord teaches them." When they rode off, the valley went quiet again. Grace leaned against the doorframe, weak with relief. Thomas watched the riders fade into the dust. He could still feel the storm sitting out there, waiting. Because men like Richard never come back just to talk. For a long time after the marshal left, the ranch stayed quiet. The kind of quiet that feels alive, like the land itself was holding its breath. Grace stood on the porch watching the horizon. The last of the riders disappeared in the orange dust of sunset. Thomas leaned against the rail beside her, arms crossed, his eyes softer than she had ever seen. "You think he'll come back?" she asked. Thomas took a slow breath. "Men like him always do, but not today. Today we rest." That night the air was warm and still. Grace couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, looking out at the silver line of the creek. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel broken. The hurt was still there, but it didn't own her anymore. Over the weeks that followed, the wounds on her wrists faded. So did the fear in her eyes. She learned to mend fences, feed the cattle, even ride alone down to the creek. Thomas watched from a distance, never saying much, but always near enough if she needed him. He had known loss too. Maybe that was why their silences fit together so easily. One evening, months later, Grace brought him a bowl of stew. He smiled, tired but content. "You cook better than any trail hand I ever met," he said. She laughed. "I guess hunger makes everything taste good." He looked at her then, a look that said more than words could manage. "You gave this place life again," he said quietly. "Guess we both needed saving." The wind outside carried the sound of nightbirds and slow water. Grace reached across the table, her hand resting on his. There was no speech, no promise, just a calm, knowing that two souls had found their way back from the edge. The next spring, the valley bloomed brighter than anyone remembered. Wildflowers spread across the fields where blood had once dried. A cradle sat by the window now, soft blankets folded inside. Grace hummed as she worked, her voice steady and full. Thomas stepped in from the yard, dust on his boots, sunlight on his shoulders. He stopped to watch her for a moment, then said, "You know, this place finally feels like home." She smiled. "It was always home. We just had to earn it. And maybe that's the lesson hidden in the dust of the high desert. That pain can build you if you let it. That kindness can grow even in hard soil. And that sometimes the people who save us are the ones who are just as lost. Now tell me, if you had ridden past that broken cart on that summer day, would you have stopped? If this story touched your heart, go ahead and give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey through the wild heart of the West. Now take a sip of your coffee, breathe slow, and tell me this in the comments.